In the last century, a handful of Gulf states turned one commodity, oil, into some of the highest per capita incomes on Earth. Africa has never had that commodity, but it has another one. Actually, it has 6. The metals the world now needs to build the energy transition: lithium, cobalt, copper, nickel, manganese, rare earths are more distributed, more indispensable, and collectively more valuable than the oil of the Gulf ever was. Most of them are under African ground. The question is whether this time the wealth stays. A clean energy economy is more metal-intensive than a fossil one, by a large margin. An electric car contains roughly 6 times more critical minerals than a conventional car. A wind turbine uses 9 times more than a gas-fired power plant. A battery storage system is, by weight, mostly metal. The International Energy Agency projects that by 2040, global demand for lithium will rise by roughly 4 times, demand for cobalt by about 2, for copper by around 1.5, for the rare earth elements used in electric motors by more than 3. These are not incremental shifts. They describe a structural realignment of the commodities market, comparable only to the rise of oil in the 20th century. And like the rise of oil, the geography matters. The fossil era was defined by who sat above the hydrocarbons: the Gulf, Russia, Venezuela. The transition era is defined by who sits above the battery metals. By that measure, Africa is the new Gulf, 6 of them, stacked. The Democratic Republic of the Congo produces around 70% of the world's cobalt. Almost all of it comes from a copper-cobalt belt that runs through the country's southeast into Zambia. Zambia itself is among the world's top 10 copper producers. Together, the DRC and Zambia sit on a significant share of the copper the energy transition will need this decade. Zimbabwe holds Africa's largest known lithium reserves. Mali, Namibia, Ghana, and Ethiopia have active lithium developments. Morocco holds roughly 70% of global phosphate reserves, a feedstock for battery-grade iron phosphate chemistries and for fertilizer. Gabon and South Africa are major manganese producers. South Africa dominates global platinum group metal supply. The list is unusual. No single African country dominates every mineral, but taken together, the continent is positioned across 6 of the 7 metals the transition depends on. The Gulf states won the last energy economy by holding a single commodity tightly. Africa, if it coordinates, can hold a table. Holding the ore is not the same as capturing the value. Today, an estimated 70 to 90% of the world's battery-grade lithium, cobalt, and rare earth refining takes place in China. Africa extracts. Others process. Others assemble. With every stage added, the value multiplies. Raw cobalt hydroxide from the DRC sells for a few tens of thousands of dollars per ton. Refined battery-grade cobalt sulfate, the product that cathode factories actually buy, trades at several times that. Lithium concentrate and battery-grade lithium hydroxide show the same gap. The margin lies downstream. Beneath the industrial story sits a social one. An estimated 15 to 30% of DRC cobalt is mined artisanally, by hand, often by families, often in pits without formal safety. Human rights litigation, ESG sourcing rules, and consumer-facing supply chain laws in the EU and the US now price that risk into every ton. So the question is not whether Africa's minerals are valuable. They are increasingly so. The question is whether the value accrues on the continent or leaves it. In its first decade, the lithium economy has answered that question in exactly the same way the first decade of the oil economy did. The template is Indonesia. In 2020, Indonesia banned the export of unprocessed nickel ore. Raw nickel could no longer leave the country. To keep buying, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese firms had to build smelters and battery precursor plants on Indonesian soil. Within 3 years, Indonesia moved from exporting ore to exporting battery-grade nickel products at several times the value per ton. The policy was blunt, the result was not. Variants of it are now being prepared across Africa. The DRC and Zambia have signed a framework to jointly develop copper-cobalt battery precursors. Zimbabwe has required lithium concentrate to be partially processed domestically. Nigeria has introduced a local beneficiation requirement for new lithium mining licenses. None of these policies have yet produced an Indonesian-scale shift, but the direction is the point. The old resource model sold the ore and imported the finished good back. The new model, unevenly, imperfectly, is trying to hold value on the continent. What Africa has not had since independence is the second step. This decade is the test of whether it can build it. The comparison to the Gulf is tempting. It is also incomplete. The Gulf got rich on a single commodity held by a small number of states at a moment when demand was growing for decades and prices were protected by a cartel. Africa's critical mineral position is different. The commodities are plural, the states are many, and the processing value, the real wealth, sits mostly outside the continent for now. But the potential is not rhetorical. The in-ground value of Africa's transition minerals, by most industry estimates, runs into the trillions of dollars, of the same order of magnitude as the proven oil reserves of the Gulf. Whether Africa becomes the new Gulf depends on a choice being made now. Coordination between producers, investment in processing, enforcement of labor and environmental standards. The metal is already in the ground. The wealth is a decision.